Good afternoon, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us today at the Digital Therapeutic panel of RESI March 2021. We have 4 investors here on this panel today who would love to share their thoughts and perspective in this space. This panel will be moderated by Andy Merkin from Burns & Levinson, and I'll let him make the rest of the introduction.
Great, thank you, Joey. I think for everybody's benefit, I think we're down to 3 panelists. Unfortunately, we had a last-minute timing conflict of interest with one of our panelists. So we've got myself moderating and 3 terrific panelists for you today. Good afternoon. Hope everybody continues to be safe and healthy. As Joey mentioned, my name is Andy Merkin. I'm a partner in the business law group at the Boston law firm Burns & Levinson, where I'm also co-chair of the life sciences practice. I'd like to thank RESI for inviting me to moderate today. This is, I think, my 15th RESI conference, both in person and virtual, and I'm just thrilled to be with everybody today. Before I introduce the panelists, just some quick background. I'm excited to be moderating this panel today, as we are seeing much more activity in the digital therapeutics area these days. We represent both sides of investment transactions, companies in receiving and investors in making digital therapeutics investments. And we also represent on day-to-day matters on the company side, digital therapeutics companies as they are growing and succeeding. Today, Life Science Nation and the RESI conference have pulled together an outstanding group of representatives of digital therapeutics investors and key players in the area to share with you their thoughts on what they're seeing in the space. Please feel free to submit any questions through the Q&A feature. And we will do our best to have them all answered. Finally, as I just advised the panelists, I'm experiencing some electrical grid issues in my home office. So if I go dark, which has already happened today, I'll be back in about 30 seconds. With that, I would like to ask each of our 3 panelists to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their organizations, their background, how they got to where they are today, in the roles that they play within their organizations. We are certainly going to drill down into a lot of that more as we go on, but just for the benefit of the attendees to have a sense for who these terrific panelists are. Maybe just to start with Anne.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. So I am Anne de Geest. I'm a pioneer in the health tech space. In fact, I coined the world 35 years ago. And I've been a serial entrepreneur in this space, as well as a mentor capitalist and investor. I started MedStars, which is the 2 company I'm running. One is MedStar, the other one is Health Tech Capital, with the idea to work with large corporations as well as early stage company there and helping them create new business models for the health tech space, which is really more about changing healthcare delivery using technology from the computer industry there. I got lucky or smart, depending how you look at it, to get 8 IPOs and $18 billion in market cap. So this company became major market categories there. In 2010, I started Health Tech Capital, which we'll spend more time on, which is an ecosystem of accredited investors and large corporations, strategic corporations, including J&J, which is another part of J&J here. And we have a good relationship with Plug and Play, so it's a small ecosystem. We've invested typically in the seed Series A, maybe some bridges to the Series B. We have over 45 companies in our portfolio. In a very quick level, we invest in the 5 P buckets. Who pays? And that could be the patient, the providers, the pharma, the providers, and the employees. So, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We have a mentoring program there, so we're really early stage.
Thank you. And if I could just ask one follow-up on that. So are you an actual fund, or is it, as you said, a group of different investors from different areas who will in some way co-invest in a deal?
Yeah. That was going to be one of your future questions, but I'm happy to answer it now. So we are like acting like a group of angels. So we behave as a group. We review the deals as a group. We negotiate as a group, but we invest directly on the cap table. So every angel make a decision. And as you would expect, when you have people like J&J, Philips, and Merck, they make their own decision, and they also go directly there. So we don't have a fund per se. So unfortunately, the question you're going to ask me is what's the average investment? We don't, because it depends on who wants to invest.
Okay, but that's a helpful to frame it for folks. Julianne, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Julianne. I'm an investor at Plug and Play, where I focus on healthcare. Plug and Play is a pretty broad player, so we invest across the board, everything from brand retail, food, sustainability, supply chain. So health is one of those areas for us. We're primarily B2B investors, but we do dabble in direct consumer. And we're a family office style shop, but we have some funds as well. So we're pretty complex, I think, not unlike Anne's group. And then my background before Plug and Play, I was focused on strategy and business development in the pharma space. And we got my start as a life science therapeutics investor. And I've always worked in that early stage, which is where Plug and Play likes to play as well.
Great. And actually, can I follow up with one of your points as well? You mentioned that in part you operate as in a family office structure. Is that a group of family offices who are investing together as opposed to you being a family office?
It's not a group, it's just a big family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so but it is a more of a traditional family office in terms of a single.
Right. We don't have, and in case anyone on the line is not as clear on that, we don't have outside investors funding the investments. We fund investments from our own, the family's, wealth portfolio, and then have a bit of that evergreen where, there's elements that are recycled in. We've been around for 15 years, so we've had a number of unicorns, including one last week, our newest. So been able to use our success to continue investing.
No, that's exciting. And just for anybody who has more interest in family offices, interestingly, at the January JPM RESI, we did a really, I thought, insightful panel on family office investing, which for a lot of people were just really starting to understand what that's all about. So I could certainly direct people ultimately, I think, to the link to that if they wanted to see. Thank you, Julie and Varun.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Resi. It's good to meet all of you, and it's good to be on panel with Anne and Julianne. My name is Varun. I work for Johnson & Johnson Innovation, supporting digital health partnerships for Johnson & Johnson Innovation based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I also have digital responsibilities supporting a new group within Johnson & Johnson called the Lung Cancer Initiative and the World Without Disease Accelerator. Prior to this, I had many roles within the construct of J&J Innovation in the space of digital health, business technology, and prior to which supported a few digital health initiatives of my own right. It's good to meet all of you, and I look forward to this panel.
Great, thank you. And when you said you're in Cambridge, right? And Julian, you are physically located where?
I'm physically in Cleveland, and Plug and Play's headquarters are in Sunnyvale, California.
Thank you. And you're on the west. You're on the west.
I'm on the West Coast. I'm near Stanford.
Okay. Well, we've got it. We've got both coasts and the Midwest covered. Okay, terrific. So why don't we jump right in? And let me ask. Let's start a baseline for today's panel. What exactly is digital therapeutics, and what are some of the common misperceptions people have about "quote unquote" digital therapeutics?
Maybe I can start with that and say that the term digital therapeutics, I mean, we've, at least at Johnson & Johnson Innovation, and I personally think that the Digital Therapeutic Alliance has defined it the best way, and in the most universal way it ought to be defined. That is a clinically evaluated, evidence-based software that can treat, manage, and prevent a broad spectrum of diseases and disorders, and is delivered directly to patients. Now, the term digital therapeutics today sort of within that finiteness can be misconstrued to be a regular digital health product where it is just tracking a measurement or is providing a digital biomarker or is sort of enhancing the process of medical adherence, etc. But a digital therapeutic in many ways is something that can work like medicine. It is medicine in the sense that it can intervene with that patient directly. So I'll say that that's maybe my take on it, and I'll maybe ask Anne, Julianne to chime in.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing up digital medicine because people are getting confused. There's digital health, which is the big pie. Then there's digital medicine in my mind as people are making clinical claims. And then you have digital therapeutics. So not only are they making clinical claims, a subsection of that, but they also have real world evidence that they change the outcomes. And as a result of changing the outcomes, you have a patient impact that somebody's willing to pay for. And so typically, if you look at this business model there, you have a payer and employers or providers who are willing to pay for that based on those better outcomes. And I think that's a big difference, where we see a lot of people with wearables and they make claims on what's called digital medicine, but the true digital therapeutic are people who change the outcome. And it has to be quantified and validated, and it has to work within an existing clinical workflow. It cannot be standalone by itself. So I think it's a subsection of digital medicine, which is a great evolution of the industry over the last 10 years.
And I would just add that, Varun, the definition you referenced had a lot of qualifications, and a lot of early stage companies don't do all of those things, and we don't certainly expect them to be able to do all of those things. So it's okay if you don't have you're not doing all of the elements of the definition, but that should be it's a great roadmap to where do you want to be in a number of years, to build out that full comprehensive platform and not just the one little piece here and there.
Right.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, everybody. That's very helpful. I think, Anne, you mentioned sort of health tech, and then you collapse it into digital medicine, and then collapse it more into digital therapeutics. That's, I think, a good way for everybody to look at it. And in fact, just as we're going along today, if to the extent you can, given confidentiality issues, et cetera, to the extent you can, you maybe give some examples of some of the companies you're working with, whether you name them or not, but just the specifics of sort of what they're actually doing, I think that will help people understand as well in the discussion. So moving on, and after your great intros, you talked a little bit about sort of your organizations, what they do, but I just like to ask maybe each of you to give a little bit more detail, maybe almost like an elevator pitch. So if somebody says, hey, who are you with and what do you do? What would you say? And part of that also is, what interests you in this space so much?
So I can kick that one off. At Plug and Play, we call ourselves a global innovation platform. So one of our unique aspects is that we are all around the world. We're in 35 cities globally on all the major continents. And so we do help startups that are looking to expand into new markets or move into the US. So we help connect people wherever they may be. And we're thinking that long-term broad startup, it's not that we start with the early stage, but at the end of the day, that big unicorn company, they're going to be global. They're not just going to be in the US. If you look at some of the big tech companies today, they're in every country, or trying to be in every country around the world. And that's what we want to. So that's a really fun element of what we do. And we're not just investors. We run business development programs for startups. So these programs are free for the startups. We don't want to take equity away from those companies to help them grow, and provide some hands-on mentorship and support, really focused on their sales and partnership strategy to keep accelerating their growth. And then we have a whole corporate partner network based on our different industry focus areas, so health being one of them. A lot of the pharma companies, hospital systems, governments, technology, players, device makers, all sorts of major leading brands that partner with us to find innovation and work with startups to solve the unique needs that they have and challenges that they have. And so we then act as a bit of a matchmaker, trying to connect the best startups to the corporations. And you can take two competing, pharma companies who have the same topic, and they'll go in different directions with it. So despite there being, on the outside, it seems like there's competition, but when you actually get down to recommending startups and seeing who goes where with the startups, it always is very different. And so our job there is really just to be a facilitator to help those startups grow through strategic relationships.
No, that's great. And I know we're going to talk a little bit later more about sort of specific investing styles and stages. So I'll maybe ask you a little bit about them. But did I hear you say you have 35 offices at Plug and Play? It's
growing. It could be more than that now. I know we're like planning a trip to India, this spring to work on that area of the world. So we're constantly still growing and adding to our office count.
So, I mean, generally speaking, how large is the organization in terms of people?
Sure. So we have over 600 employees and about 100 people on the venture side alone. So those are folks like me who are talking to startups every day and trying to find the best new ideas and founders and connect them to our resources and our corporate partners and see if they fit our investment thesis.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. Either Varun or Anne, would you like to tell us a little more detail?
Sure, let me jump in. So I started my career more in the traditional medical devices and, launch pulse oximetry, which hopefully all of you have one at home with COVID. And if you think about it, historically, when we did medical devices and biotech, we were providing a new device in the direct-to-doctor tools kit so that he can use with the patient to fix a specific organ. And that's really where the industry was. It was all about high product risk going after an existing market. I wanted to do the reverse, which is I wanted to use business models and technology from the computer industry that was emerging in the 80s and to basically go after a workflow that we have nothing to do with a doctor, like a nurse or a pharmacist, and then really developing a new way of delivering healthcare. And if you think about digital therapeutics, it's exactly what that is. It's patient-centric. Is how, and this is, ask me, why do I do this? Because we are treating the person as a whole. We're personalizing it. We're providing the supports, all the mental health, in addition of basically putting the right information for the right person at the right time. And so I founded Health Tech Capital in 2010 because despite the fact I had a lot of success every time I would work with a young entrepreneur and I will go to a J&J person, not to pick on J&J, is they say, oh, you got lucky last time, this one will never work, because they were all market risk. And if you look about this space, it's all about not will it work, but who's going to pay for it and why can you scale up? And so we basically are focusing on that, and we decide to have an ecosystem of accredited investors, like an angel group, that work with large strategics, so we can open up the doors to the J&J, the Merck, the Philips, the ResMed at an earlier stage that you traditionally would do. And so our portfolio company have raised over $900 million. So we write small checks, but we are smart checks at the beginning. We do a lot of mentoring. 36% of our members are women and 48% are non-white. As a result of that, if you look at our portfolio, it's very diverse. 26% of our CEOs are women and 23% non-white. And I think we are absolutely agnostic on those criteria there. And so as far as digital health, we were the first group of investors in Amada Health, which is like one of the big category name in the space, as well as Wildflower Health, which is also a very big player there. And we have a lot of upcoming company like Sana Health, which is for pain management. Nimble is for people who maybe, fall and break their hips. Bloom Life, which is more in the pregnancy space. So we've been pretty active in this space. And I'll let Varun pick it up from there.
And actually, if I could also just jump for a second, and Varun, could you also just mention personally, are you coming into this from the science side of things or the business side of things? And I'd love to just hear from Julia and as well, from just your background. So which of the two areas did you start before you converged to where you are now?
It's a great question. And maybe let me share a little bit more about J&J Innovation and then jump to the question. So J&J Innovation is Johnson & Johnson's external innovation arm. We sit abstracted from the mothership, responsible for our early stage partnerships across the healthcare ecosystem. We're global, and we operate with the intention to truly help enrich the healthcare science and technology roadmap. So we incubate, we collaborate, we invest, depending on what's valuable to the company, what's valuable to us. We try and make this truly a win-win. And we operate through a few banners. So we have JLabs, which is our incubator network, that we have 13 JLabs globally. We have Washington, D.C. that's launching soon. We have the innovation centers. We have 4 major innovation centers: Boston, Silicon Valley, London, Shanghai, and we have a few partnering offices that are sprinkled across the world in Australia and South Korea. And within these innovation centers are equipped with full deal-making capability. So we do everything from research collaborations to new codes we're a very creative team when it comes to collaboration, because of the fact that for us win-win is so important, and recognizing the importance of a startup getting to a pinnacle of success is important. We truly resonate with that in the way we partner. Our equity investment group sits within the innovation centers, JJDC, and we leverage equity as an instrument as we think it makes sense. My responsibility within this whole construct. Now, this whole construct represents all of Johnson & Johnson: consumer, medical devices, pharmaceuticals. One of those rare places in a global leader like Johnson & Johnson, where all 3 business sectors, all missions come together, and you can walk down a corridor and meet someone from a very different sector, a very different therapeutic area, looking for things. I represent the digital health space for Johnson & Johnson Innovation in partnership with medical devices, pharma, and consumer health. And Lung Cancer Initiative from a technology perspective, given my second role. Now, my approach to this, I am by education a business guy, by experience a business and a technology guy. But as a passionate individual, someone who loves science. So I, over the weekends, read orthopedics, I read immunology, I read what I must to truly understand the problems that we're all trying to solve for. So so to answer your question, I'd say kind of everything, some with a level of formality and some with a level of informality, but by education and by academic or by qualification, I'm a mid-market M&A business guy, but approaching it with different lenses.
Yeah, I have the dual. I have a master in engineering from Belgium. That's the little accent, the French twist you hear. And then also an MBA from Harvard. So I got a foot on both sides. And then I picked up healthcare, living in it.
Yeah, and I would say I'm the same, but technically on the business side and investor side, but you spend every day in healthcare, and you just read and learn, and it's a little more informal training and on the job, science training.
That's great. Thank you. So I promise we're going to get to very shortly and follow up on a little bit more about what everybody was talking about of all the things that your organizations do aside from sort of the straight investing. And which it actually just as an observation, and I don't know if this was by choice, by design or not, but all three of your groups, are not typical, just write a check and move on. Which I think is terrific. It gives everybody a lot of insights, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before we do, just let's sort of start at look at the straight, the straight investing piece of it. And I'd ask any of the three who are doing a lot on the investing front, just to tell us a little bit about the landscape in which you're investing, sort of what you're seeing, numbers of deals a year, size of deals. I know Ann made a comment earlier about, I think it may be difficult because there are different stages. So just talk a little bit about, again, stages, investment style, and also just, even though we're now a year into this, but still always interested in hearing how COVID has, if it has at all, impacted that.
Well, maybe I can just talk about the funding at a high level, and we can each have our little, view of it. So the funding literally increased by 55% last year because of COVID. I mean, it just exploded the space. Of course, as you would expect, it's telehealth and remote patient monitoring leading the charge. The other issue, I think, and for the entrepreneurs on the call, there has been an influx of new, what I call tourist investors, just for the fun of it. And what I mean by that, Rug Health showed that 40% of the investors last year were people who had never invested in health tech. In the space. And of course, the issue there is to make sure that your investor there has a full understanding of the challenges of healthcare, as opposed to be what I call the technology investors. The other thing that has happened in the space is that there's been an increase in what I call the mega deals. These are deals that are over $270 million for a round, which is massive. So the average size of the round has jumped from $20 million in 2019 to $32 million. So that's massive. I mean, it's just. Now,
are these initial funding rounds, or these are?
No, this is the average of all the rounds. And I think it's really a problem because as a result of people moving what's called to later stage, the quality deals, whatever we call that, or the fake unicorns, depending who you're talking to. I guess this is recorded. I should be careful what I'm saying. Is that there has been a drop. I won't mention any names. There has been a drop in seed and Series A. And I think that a lot of the people in the room here are seed and Series A. And so that has for the first time dropped to less than 50% of all investment in the number of deals. And so the post-money valuation now is extreme, in a polite way, in the Series C's and D, and it's being driven by some of the large round being done. The same problem is happening with the Series A. The Series A is not what it used to be. The Series A is the old B, as I call it. And so what's happened is that the average post-money valuation for Series A now is $40 million. It's absolutely insane. And the reason it's because it's post-money is because people raise so much money for Series A, which historically used to be $5 million. Now you see $20 million and up raised happening there. And that is create a big problem because what we see this is a very high bar. And so it still takes 2 to 3 years to sell anything in healthcare. Would it be to a providers or to a payers or to an employers? It still takes time. If your post-money valuation is so high and you need significant revenue to get to the next round, you see a lot of people right now are having a problem getting there. And so I think you need to really be smart in your funding strategy because it's an overheated market, in my opinion. So that's for the general status, and everybody can disagree. I hope they will. In fact, what we do is that we have members across the globe. One of the nice things that happened with COVID there is that it's no longer about geography, it's time zone. Can people be there at the same time we're having our meetings there? We're still focusing on US-based company, just because we do a lot of mentoring there. It's hard to do that if they're in Israel or a part of the world. We act as a group to review the deals like we talked before, and we have a monthly cycle, so we kind of can provide a response quickly. This is very important there. Most of the entrepreneurs, half the time, they don't know how to tell their story. So if they go and pitch to us, so this is for the people who pitch to us, we give them a feedback. This is what we heard. This is what we have issues with. And that's half the time, it's just a question of communicating if we didn't hear it right. And that's easy to fix. If on the other hand, we think that they spend all their time on the technology and not fixing the problem, that's also important for them to hear. So I think it's really important that people give them feedback. And we have pretty much a 30% funding rate if somebody gets into the due diligence process. So we vet it very quickly there. Arun, do you agree with me? It's overheated?
I absolutely do. I think it's overheated, and it's also it's becoming richer. The number of companies, the kinds of technologies. I'm speaking specifically of health technology in the context of digital therapeutics. There is more to invest in. It's a demand and supply overheating, and the risk profiles. Part of the valuation is also the risk profiles have shifted tremendously over the last few years. There's appetite for less knowledge on what you're like. I think we're seeing that more companies are more comfortable de-risking themselves over time, not like a tech company, but like a healthcare company. And so there is that trend that's, please feel free to challenge that I think is also shifting trends a little.
And actually, Barbara, what is an example of de-risking in this space that you're talking about?
Well, from digital therapeutics, I think Anne and Julian and both cited this earlier. It's evidence. It really is. First off, technical prudence. I mean, knowing that you have a product that is a well-built technology product that can withstand certain gold standards, and like building technology in a regulated space is actually a difficult thing. It's not easy, but to be able to prove that a technology product has followed design control, has followed a certain level of quality standards that can exhibit clear data privacy, data standards, can show like it can work every single time it has to work, I think is one thing. The other is evidence for patients, like real world evidence, observational studies. The gold standard is obviously remote, clinical trials, but at the same time, that's like gold standard. I'm curious what Anne or Julian think of this.
Yeah, no, I mean, you bring a very good point, and I see a lot of people who show that technology works, but that doesn't mean it works in the real world. Usability, engagement, retention, compliance, all of that is an oversight by a lot of engineers. And I think, for me, digital therapeutics only work if in the real world people do use it. They get the value, somebody's willing to pay for that, and that's a different person. It's very complicated. And then I think one of the big problems, without mentioning the name of some of the big leaders, is that they're having problem even being integrated into Epic. How do you get a physician to write a prescription for software? We haven't fully figured that out. It's not in the formulary of the pharmacy benefit management. So who is paying for that? Where does it fall in the clinical flow? And very often, a lot of people focusing on the technology, not understanding the business issue that will come down the pipeline. And I think, Julian, you probably have some issues, some thoughts about that.
Well, yeah, and you can't really, there's not much you can do to speed up the time it takes to get the real world evidence. So even though all of the funding stages have been pushed earlier and earlier, you still get to this point where you need to have the product in use for so many months or years to have really good data set, and you can't do anything about that And yeah, the rounds are overvalued. It's so hot, and then things are closing quicker. There's more and more interest now in pre-seed deals, and including at Plug and Play, because the Series A's are getting too expensive for us. So we're like, okay, we'll do more. But in a highly regulated industry like healthcare, what does a pre-seed deal look like? And it can't, we're not we're not an incubator. We're not trying to invest off of a deck. We want to invest off a product that has been built and has some initial user data, some initial use case, and that just takes time. And so then it's, the entrepreneurs are saying, well, how do I do that if no one will fund me? How do I build up that data set without the right group of support in the early stages? So we're hearing it from the entrepreneurs that they're feeling squeezed and are struggling, and just everything they were taught about what the standards were for a seed or a Series A are not true anymore. Yeah,
it's totally for the windows.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I mean, now we see people saying, I'm a pre-seed. I said, that did not exist before. What the hell is that? And then I'm seed 1, I'm seed 2, I'm seed 3. What the hell? I think really what happens is that, there's so much money chasing. It's like a gold rush, honestly, that the Series A is when you have revenues, you have validated the models, and it's really grows, it's starting to grow the business. You have a cookie, you've shown somebody wants to eat it, and you have a form of a cookie cutter. That used to be the Series B when you got there. So I think, don't get stuck in the alphabet soup of the name of a round, because it has no meaning. It's really about the risk you have at that stage.
So let me ask you this, because you would think, you've all talked about a lot of money chasing deals, overheated rounds, valuations that are too large. One would think that, especially for the early stage entrepreneurs, this would be a good thing, but I'm hearing possibly the opposite, which is that it may be harder for the very, very early stage companies to get the attention of those who are investing, because those who are investing are looking at a little bit later stage and bigger deals. But tell me if I'm hearing that wrong. But also just tell me, generally speaking, what are their downsides to the companies that are looking to raise funding, given what given this overheated market?
Yeah, I see it, because, I think probably a bit earlier than what Varun will probably see, that we see a lot of misunderstanding of what's realistic expectation from the side of the entrepreneur, if I can be polite about that. And so at times they come in there, they want valuations are too high for the risk they are in, or there's like 2 engineers and they absolutely have no idea what the rest of the business will look like. And so we've walked away because we said, we're only going to get diluted and wiped out later on. I said, it's burn the money. It's easier than to try to go for that. And so we've seen a lot of entrepreneurs shoot themselves in the foot, and they come back a year later, being more humble. That's not a good thing, because you can't really, hurt the company doing that. So the other thing we have seen, and I think maybe Plug and Play could jump on that too, is we see a lot of people using the wrong instruments. The Y Combinator came up with the concept of the SAFE. And the SAFE was really designed initially for the 100K you get from friends and family. You have no idea if there's going to be a company afterwards. It's like an IOU on a piece of paper. If I ever get funding, it will convert. But there is really no legal terms that's really enforceable. And so we now see people doing a SAFE of $5-6 million after they had a price seed round. It's just like, it doesn't make any sense. So we see a lot of people misusing the wrong, what's called investment instruments, don't understand the consequence. At times they have no idea how much dilution they take, trying to explain it to them. And so I think there's a lot of cleanup that needs to happen in the early stage. And a lot of entrepreneurs are unfortunately jumping to the wrong conclusion that the market is upside down their way, where in reality it's twisting the other way.
Yeah, just because you can raise the round now at the valuation, at a high valuation, doesn't mean that's going to continue. And so if you run into the problem that Anne just described, where you've raised maybe a seed round, a price seed round, and then you're not ready for your Series A, everyone's sort of telling you that, and then you're sort of stuck raising a seed plus or a bridge. I think seed plus is just a fancy way of saying bridge nowadays. But then you take it as a SAFE because you don't want to price. It gets really messy and complicated, and it doesn't look good to investors either. And so then we're kind of like, we'll go, maybe this isn't the right time for us to join the round. So you either didn't raise enough to get you to the end point you needed to, because you should really raise enough money to hit the milestones, and those milestones will let you raise the next big round. Or else they it's questions, you sort of wonder if they mismanaged the money that they did raise, and that's why they didn't hit those milestones. Because you really have to question, like, why is there this fundraise here if it's not just a traditional seed? Series A, what's going on there. And then if the valuation, they might be raising that safe because they can't get the valuation they want because they overvalued earlier on. So that's the worst case scenario is you never want to have a down round. You never want your valuation to go down. But if you start too high, you can make it hard to go up enough. So it's okay to kind of cool it down and don't let a big investor pressure you on the valuation number.
I will maybe share this from a different lens. From my observation, I think the whole digital space is still a very evolving space. For a company that's in biotech, the R&D stages, they've been lived and walked past. Like most biotechs know that there's a discovery phase to a company. There is a prototyping phase. If you're a med tech company, there's a preclinical proof of concept phase. There's a phase 1, there's a phase 2, there's a phase 3. But in the digital therapeutic space, I think it's very different. And now it's different, and I don't know if there's a standard. That's point number one. Point number two is the means. What's the end in that path? Because for a lot of us are still trying to figure out who's going to commercialize digital therapeutics. What is the commercial model? To Anne's point of who's going to pay for it? Is it are digital therapeutics going to be commercialized by pharma companies? Are they going to be commercialized by the digital therapeutic companies themselves? Or are there alternative business models that need to be sorted out? Business to payer is complicated, as I mentioned. Again, like EMR integrations have not been figured out. And so the ecosystem is still not ready and is not ready to ingest at the pace at which digital therapeutics companies are growing. So there is a sense of there are growing pains. There's a lot of ambiguity of that path. Now, going to funding, that in a very traditional and maybe in a very rudimentary sense defines the stages, right? Risk profiles define the stages. But when you don't have R&D stages, how do you define the risk profiles? And when you don't have the risk profiles, then how do you further? So that's maybe the way I'm seeing it as well, that it often comes down to, are you running? This is also the reality that this is a tech business. So do you invest like a tech investor in a biotech space, or do you invest like a biotech investor, recognizing that randomized clinical trials are very expensive and they need to be planned for? But tech development is very front heavy, from a fixed cost perspective, and there's a certain the curve goes like this in some ways. So there's a lot of more questions to the commentary than maybe insights, but that's sort of how I'm seeing the current state.
Yeah, you're totally right. The roadmap hasn't been proved by anybody. And in fact, some of them exploded very, very, very ugly way. And it goes back about, it's not necessarily about the product working, but how do you get it into the existing payment workflows and distribution workflow that nobody has figured out yet. And if you have to hire your own direct sales force and you don't have the coding and you don't have the payment, and then you have all to get the physician to write a prescription, nobody has figured that one out yet. And people are not spending enough time at the beginning of the problem at the seed series A to ask those questions, because that will define what your product looks like if you don't have the answers.
So so what I'm hearing a couple of things. One is that, just as a broad characterization, it sounds like the funding rounds are just much more complicated for a lot of reasons. Varun made the good comment that says both the demand and the supply, right, of deals is increasing. So let me ask you this: if I am an entrepreneur looking to raise my first institutional round, I guess the good news is that there's a lot of money and a lot of groups out there. The bad news is it may be harder for me to figure out who is going to be the right partner for me. So the question is, should an entrepreneur decide or help decide which investor group is going to be a good partner for them? What questions should they be asking either the investor or asking themselves?
That's a good point, because Anne brought up the tourist investor, which I love that term. And so you have all these new investors into health space, because health is now the hottest space, because of COVID. And it's money, and if you need to fill out the round, not every investor in your round, they may not all be strategic. If you can have every investor be really strategic, that's awesome. But it's okay to have a check from an angel that's just a check, and that's that. but those tourist investors likely don't have that healthcare knowledge. And they may have like the tech expertise, but then they may actually give you bad advice because they're pushing a model that is proven in tech that's not proven in healthcare. And so you might have this, maybe you want that, or but you need to also realize like the dangers of listening to that, because none of the tech giants have proven that they're better than the healthcare players in the industry yet. I know there's lots of talk about what they do, but we're not using Google or Facebook for a lot of our healthcare. So, I'm still skeptical on that side of things. And make sure you like your investor, whoever it is, whoever your main point of contact is. If you don't want to have a drink with them, if you wouldn't want to have lunch with them, outside of the investment, then like, do you really want to have to talk to them monthly at least, or quarterly, or every other day? Do you like their communication style? Like, does it make sense to you? And you can kind of get some of this from the due diligence process. How much feedback are they giving you, as like Anne said, or are they giving you any ideas or advice just off the cuff while you're talking that is useful to you right now and not just in the future? It gives you some sense. Some of this is like soft skills, not like hard questions to ask. But you can also do reference checks on your investors. So ask your investor for a reference check to another portfolio company and call them. That happened to me on my last deal, and it's fine. It's not unexpected, and it's not unlike a job interview. So you have your references ready, and you shouldn't be afraid that your portfolio is going to say bad things about you, because that means you're not a good investor.
Yeah, and what you want is smart money. And I think the three of us, I think we're different money, not just writing a check. And in the seed and Series A stages, it's really critical, because it doesn't matter how smart you are, nobody has all the answers. And so the more you surround yourself with a village of people who have a lot of scars and they've learned a lot, the better off you are, because you don't want to repeat the mistakes that other people have done before. And I think a lot of the people like us is that we bring the expertise of having looked at a lot of deals, knowing what has worked and has not worked in the last 15, 20, or 30 years, depending on the institution we work with. And that's what we're sharing back. And I think that's what the entrepreneurs at times totally underestimate, is that in the seed and Series A stage, it's really the smart money that makes the difference in the outcome. It's not just writing a big check at a big valuation there. It's the people that avoid you going straight into a pothole over the cliff at 100 miles an hour, because they know that they've been there, they've done that before. And all of that information is available. The web is wonderful for that. Look at the portfolio company, look and call the CEOs of those companies. Find out where we all are doing videos now on Zoom, so it's recorded somewhere, so do some search. And then more importantly, look at the question they ask you, and when you disagree with them, see how they take it. Is this a constructive discussion, or is this a judgment discussion? And for me, I'll be honest with you, I literally always disagree with an entrepreneur before I invest, because I want to see if they have a flexible mindset versus a fixed mindset. And that is the number one correlation with success, because nobody has all the answers. So you have to take the input from people with different perspective. And then you as a CEO make the final decision there. And we are partners. We're not just writing a check, we're partners. We want to be rewarded in the journey. That's why valuation, financing strategy makes so much sense there. And so you want people with deep experience in the healthcare. Ultimately, you will not succeed because your product works. It will succeed because somebody is using it and somebody else is paying for it. And in an environment you can scale up.
I've maybe enriched this phenomenal commentary with just two very simple points. I'm reminded of a lesson I learned from my dad. When I was starting my first business, he said, this is just like any other project at home. We always want that one aunt or uncle that can teach us how to do this. So an investor that knows the customer. Find an investor that can represent the customer so that you can learn your customer. Find an investor that knows how to run a business so that you can learn how to run a business. And have, like we all do, we need that one uncle or aunt in case we screw up. That one person we can call when we get to the cop, when the cops catch us, we can't call our parents. We call our uncles, or we call an uncle or an aunt. Just like that, not to say an investor has the accountability to cover screw ups, but we have to learn, not all of us are growth CEOs, not all of us are, startup CEOs, not all of us are turnaround CEOs. The question is, what is the strategy to help the CEO of a startup ensure that they have representation of all these different facets of being in business, being a growth CEO, being a turnaround CEO? an investor that can help us learn mistakes, that can help us calibrate, keep moving is important. Now, if for those investors, for those entrepreneurs that are on this panel and already have investors and maybe you feel like they don't meet all of this, here's the other thing. Sometimes investors are just investors. They don't need to necessarily be lifelines, and that's absolutely okay. There are other ways to gain expertise and a network. Incubator networks, accelerator networks. Plug and Play Ventures is a phenomenal place, or even JLabs, part of J&J Innovation. Great places to gain mentorship, to gain access to a network that can aid the growth of your startup. So, investors are not always the answer, but it's nice to always recognize it's a relationship. It is a marriage in a very delicate way, but or rather in a very informal way, it is a marriage. But those would maybe be the 2 points I'll end with.
No, these are all great points, and in fact, it brings us back to the value add that each of your groups, right, can bring. But it sounds like both to companies in which you have invested in and potentially companies in which you haven't. I mean, I've certainly seen in my years the shift in early to growth stage life science investing, where years ago it was literally just write the check, and hopefully the company will figure out what it's doing. But now, as you're all suggesting, and as we see, it's very much of a partnership, and the investor being able to bring additional resources, make introductions, actually understand the science and understand the business. So could each maybe just talk a little bit more, and to the extent we haven't already, about what your the other things, the value add that you guys bring in addition to just writing the check?
Yeah, let me jump in there. So we have announced a kind of a mentoring and programs. So in our ecosystem there of our members, we have people who have been CEOs, there have been people who create new markets in there, and then and we also have people who are with a medical device engineering firm as well as early stage manufacturing. And so at time we have gone to companies instead of passing, which is the easy thing to do because there's plenty of reason to pass on the seed stage, is that we say, fine, we'll work with you, but we'll do like a sweat equity. We'll invest some money there, but we also basically will have some of our members get you ready for the larger round, making you ready that you can talk to Varun for the next conversation there, because that first impression is critical, and only so many times can you go there and knock on that door. And so we've stuck with that together a program because we saw very promising young entrepreneurs, but they had so many massive holes, most of them on the commercial and business understanding of the stakeholders of what it will take after they show the product works to really get it to something that has large scale.
Yeah, and it's similar plug and play with the mentorship and the network. We don't have like the MDs and PhDs on staff, so but we know the folks out there who do have those qualifications and that background and can be a real expert advisor, even if it's just a one-time call or a continuous relationship that we arrange. Also, plug and play, we're a small check shop, so our philosophy is to write a lot of small checks. And so we know we're not the biggest investor, and we're not going to lead rounds. So we know a lot of other investors. And so we also know who to call, both for the current round, but also in the future. So you're raising your Series B, that we're really not the same kind of active investor anymore at that stage if we were in this company. But we know Series B, lead investors. We know Series C investors. So that idea of how can, our support looks different depending on where you are. But we pride ourselves on having support to offer at all levels of your company, and that we just part of it too is you got to ask for the help. You have to know what you need. Is it do you need an introduction to a specific company? Do you need an advisor on a specific topic? Are you ready to take that company to a new market? But if you just say, oh, I need help, everyone needs help and everyone needs everything at the same time. So it's much helpful to come to your investors with a clear ask when you do reach out to them.
And J&J Innovation, JJDC, is a strategic investment arm. So, and is one of the oldest corporate venture arms, by the way, in the healthcare space. Having JJDC as an investor brings naturally with it the whole toolkit of J&J Innovation. Of course, access to Johnson & Johnson, if it is, for that strategic interest is one thing, but recognizing that, different companies in different life cycles require different things. There's the incubator network, JLabs, provides companies the opportunity to be part of a community, to be part of a very robust infrastructure that can help accelerate science and technology, both with physical spaces, but also with other resources that for operations and even for further investment. The innovation centers allow collaboration. So mentorship is of course, just like Plug and Play and group, there is mentorship as well, but mentorship from experts within Johnson & Johnson that we provide. We call them JPALs. We bring them in, match them with the company depending on the needs of the company and the expertise that needs to be represented. And that's sort of it. It sort of is all encompassing and it's global. And so we provide that as well.
No, that's great. Thank all of you, because I would say a company is not, cannot succeed in today's environment without this type of assistance. I'm just keeping an eye on the clock, and I know we have one question that I do want to get to. So maybe the last question to ask before the Q&A is, given and you've all talked a little bit about some of the difficulties that entrepreneurs are having, some of the challenges. So I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of two things. One is what for companies that are not ultimately successful with you when they pitch you, what is it that they're doing wrong? Because I think you can learn more from hearing what people do wrong necessarily than what people do right. And the second is just a little more broadly, sort of what challenges do funding stage companies have in digital therapeutics in this complicated world that we're living in?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one. Sorry, Julian, do you want to go first?
Oh, no, you can go ahead. It's fine.
Okay. So I think let's break into two pieces: the pitches, why you're missing the opportunity, and what are the errors you make afterwards. On the pitches, people need to do their VC homework. Find out about me and Julian and Varun, and find out we talk health tech. We don't explain for me for 15 minutes why healthcare is screwed up. I know that. Spend 2 seconds to explain me that. Number two, in the pitches, they find you sandbox right from the beginning. That first slide should say, why am I here? This is, I'm going up to after IBF. I have 10 patients in a small study there. I'm asking $5 million, and I think I'm my right fit because you have blah, blah, blah in your portfolio company. You want to give me what you want me to retain. Don't expect me to get what you're saying right. I probably won't get it right, but if you tell me what the takeaway are, I will have a high probability of agreeing or disagreeing with you, and it's a good conversation to have. And then I think let your team shine. Have 1 or 2 presenters, but have the rest of the team available for Q&A. Show you're not one-person company there. Even if these are advisors, that's okay there. And then more importantly, describe the patient journey. What is going to happen to that patient? How do you acquire them? What do they go through? So many screenshots of the user interface, and what's the outcome, and what do you plan to do to validate that? Don't tell me you have this cool AI, natural language processing, blah, blah, blah. Tell me, what is the problem you're fixing? How is it going? Then you can tell me, the black box behind it. So that'll be my on the pitching side. On the mistakes that we have learned, we've done an analysis of the company that did not make it, and the product always worked. The customer who used it always liked it. So we got it right for the product risk and for the value proposition. Where they all fail is the people are not capable of scaling it up. It goes back to say, was your design done by asking the patients if they would use this? You'll be amazed how often that doesn't always happen. What's the addressable market? You basically shrink it to a sub-market that's so small that it's not worth investing, $150 million to get there. Did you validate it? Validate doesn't mean somebody likes it. It means you have to quantify a change in outcome with an ROI for somebody who's going to pay for that. And you may not have that from the beginning, but you need to have a roadmap on how you're going to get there. And if the assumption don't make any sense, that you're going to save $5,000 because your pricing is so high, then you have a problem. What's the payment? And people think, I have a code. Right? Code doesn't mean coverage, doesn't mean paying payment. And then people are going PMPM, they're going at risk. There's like 15 different business models, how are you going to do that? And then a lot of people don't even talk about the FDA. They're making these outrageous clinical claim on diseases, and they absolutely have no idea they're going to be regulated. That is kind of a surprise a couple of times. And the key point I think Varun brought up, and I totally agree with him, is that What's the distribution plan? Who is going to sell it? Who is going to explain this to the physician? Why would the physician prescribe this? If the physician is on the fee for services, which is still the majority of the payment system in the US, and you say, I'm going to decrease your visits, he may not necessarily appreciate that. And then the whole compliance. Why will the patient use it? I mean, I got all these wonderful wearables there. I'm supposed to be having my phone with me 24/7. That's not going to work. And so I'm just giving specific example there where you really, the idea was cool, but the implementation was weak.
And I would add the one thing you missed, Anne, is competition. Know who your competition is. You definitely have competition. Everyone's like, I don't have any competition. Yes, you do. Even the standard of care, of which there is no tech, is competition. And how are you going to break in? How are you going to get patients to convert to your digital therapeutic? But there are others. A lot of the digital therapeutics that I see are clustered in the same topic areas, same therapeutic areas. And it's like, how do you compete against those? What's different? Those people may be farther ahead than you. So it can't just be better, design, or there's got to be something there. And I always want to see that slide that helps spell it out to me.
And Julian, you bring an excellent point. I always say that, but you're totally right. Is to say, what were the competition that failed before? I'm starting to see a recycle of what I saw 10 years ago. And I said, I saw 5 companies 10 years ago who failed on this. What will you do differently? They have no idea what I'm talking about. They don't do their homework of what happened before. And it's easy to find out. I mean, there's a lot on the web.
Yeah. And I know a lot of investors are like plug and play. We don't want to invest in a competing technology. So do your homework on your investors, know what's in their portfolio, because if it's really similar to something we already have, the past may not be anything to do with you. It's that we've made a bet, and it's a little too close for comfort, and we want to keep that impartiality. It goes away later if we can't help how companies will change after we've invested, and then might run into each other. But in the beginning, we've already made an investment in a digital therapeutic for obesity and for this and for this and for this. So if you're in that space, you got to come strong on that first call, because we've already made that bet.
Terrific. So you mean when somebody puts in their business plan, we have no competition, that's not a good thing? So let's do this. I see we've got just about 2 minutes left. We had one question from Chris Haskell who asked, what disease areas do you see as next for digital therapeutics? And do you see areas where there are combinations of digital and traditional therapeutics?
I can maybe start with that and say, I want to maybe just add, clarify with Chris, a combination product, depending on which regulatory authority you go to, can be a misnomer. It can mean a device that touches a drug. I'm suspecting you mean companion product. And if that is the case, then we are seeing digital therapeutic, traditional therapeutic, a companion digital therapeutic in the oncology space more actively now. There are companion plays across various therapeutic areas, oncology being active now. I will definitely say a lot more in the pain management space, pain depending on the source of pain. There are a few companies now. And while neuroscience has been indexed, we're now seeing a lot more in the immunology and oncology spaces. So those are maybe some of the examples I can share.
Yeah, these are all great points. I mean, I see people taking all medical devices that were standalone, and then they're making an Internet of Things with an application and change of behavior attached to it. So there's not really a risk on the device, and for it still may be FDA regulated as a class 2. But then there's the data, the change of behavior, and all of that. The other area I would add to that, we've seen a lot of IBF, basically the whole digestive tract related issues there, as well as mental health. I mean, after COVID, half the country is PTSD right now, and so that somehow is a very hot area as far as investing.
I would say that there are therapeutic areas where there's no digital solution. So if you're an entrepreneur trying to find a problem to solve, go do that research. Atopic dermatitis is one I know off the top of my head. There's just almost nothing out there for those patients. We've seen enough in dermatology that skin picture analysis, we don't need that, but that care support community, something that works with the therapeutics on the market. I do think it's the companion route. I mean, that's what industry wants. Every pharma wants a digital app to go along with their prescribed medication. So it's a great business model. It pays. So to Anne's point earlier, so look there and see where nothing has been built. There's a lot of open space still.
Terrific. Well, I have to say this hour absolutely flew by. Thank you all to our three panelists who are incredibly engaging and interactive, really more so than a lot of the other panels that I've done in the past, which is great, which is terrific. I hope that, and also I see that we sort of kept our group of attendees through the whole thing, which again says, says something. So thank you to everybody, especially calling in from your 3 time zones. Thank you to the attendees. To the attendees also for those who have partnering sessions set up either later on today or the next couple days. Wish you the best of luck with that. For the 3 investors also, if you have partnering set up and you're potentially going to be meeting with some potential portfolio companies, good luck with that. And we hope that a lot of good combinations are made this week. And look forward to seeing everybody live, hopefully soon enough. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Andy.
The other 2 panelists.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.